Paulsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to thank you for holding this hearing because, part of the Joint Economics Committee's responsibility is actually to gather this type of input and make recommendations to our colleagues to take actions on some of these policies. And, regulation, the regulatory environment and the red tape environment has definitely risen to the top of what I'm hearing from my manufacturers, from small businesses, and from the medical device companies in Minnesota, for instance, in terms of how challenging it is. I want to ask one question on the tax policy because Senator Coates asked about that because, the medical device tax, which you just mentioned real quickly, Mr. Mandel, is it's been kind of front and center as a high priority for mine. Senator Klobuchar has been pushing that issue in the Senate to repeal that tax. But can you just talk a little bit about, real quick, there have been some estimates that say maybe 25% of the tax might be paid out of a state like Minnesota where we have a big ecosystem, as you mentioned, in this area. We know the Medtronics and these great companies that we have in Minnesota, but all these small companies that are directly impacted in particular. And what are you seeing on the ground that we're not seeing or hearing about in the press or in the media?
Happy to answer that question. And as you know, your congressional district is the most densely concentrated medical device cluster in the world. The medical device industry is different than pharmaceuticals and other industries. Most of the companies, 80, 90% have less than 50 employees. And, it's really where a lot of innovation takes place that can have an impact on cost as well as increase and deliver new therapies. What we're seeing is a real challenge for those early stage companies. So as you know, the medical device tax is an excise tax. It hits first sale. So in order to get a company started and to get a medical device on the market, you're talking 3, 5, 7 years, 50, 100, $150 million. And then as soon as you begin to sell to work toward profitability, you're paying the tax. Probably the biggest impact on innovation that the medical device tax is having is it's really drying up early stage investment. So you're an investor 10, 20 years ago, you put your money in medical devices and it was a great return for investors as well as great for patients. Today, with the regulatory timetables being significantly longer, the cost of going through them being significantly longer, the tax hitting first sale, if you're an investor, there are frankly, in some ways, better places to put your money. So we do see growth in places like health IT, software, a lot of the consumerization, I'll say, of healthcare, and it's really harming the next generation of medtech companies that frankly either won't get started or won't survive this period of time.
So just to follow up now on the regulatory side of that equation, you mentioned a lot of small companies get hit, and a lot of companies are developing not only traditional medical devices, but also maybe creating these medical software applications, for instance. And on the regulatory side of the equation, you've got the FDA classifying devices, and so the tax may apply to software, for instance. Does it apply to software upgrades? And can you just talk a little bit about maybe what the regulatory environment has done in our ecosystem for companies that are looking for that venture capital to start up? Are companies putting the FDA approval process, are they factoring that in to attracting venture capital as part of their business plan?
Again, happy to answer that question. Actually, we saw something change about 3 or 4 years ago. At Life Science Alley, we work with entrepreneurs in medtech specifically. We see business plans all the time. Haven't seen a business plan that intends to take a product through the FDA process first in about 3 years now. So if you have a business plan today that doesn't go to Europe first, your likelihood of getting that company or that business plan funded is, I would say, almost non-existent.
And Europe is bragging about getting products, as your testimony said, 3 years earlier for their patients versus our patients, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's look up the website. It's called Don't Lose the Three. So it's a marketing campaign in Europe.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just mention, too, Senator Klobuchar, she mentioned least burdensome principle, some of the provisions in the user fee legislation that we passed, Mr. Chairman, in both bodies and in law now, we need to follow through on. And I'll give some compliments to Jeff Shuren, who we continue to meet with on a quarterly basis to make sure we're tracking and benchmarking the law. But we need to make sure that that cultural issue, which we were just talking about, is actually going to be moving forward as well so that we're not stifling growth and innovation in a very important industry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Paulsen. Senator Lee.